I remember I was actually brought into a Texas high school to speak to students one day. And I don't think the people who brought me in really knew anything about me, knew kind of the premise of what I was going to talk about. And so they introduced me to the students. And I remember them saying, hey, this is George Couros. He's from Canada. And he's going to talk to you about social media for the next part of the day. And as soon as they said that, the students just groaned. They're like, seriously? And it clicked in me that they thought what I was going to talk about for the next 30 to 60 minutes was don't do this, focusing on all the things they shouldn't do in these different spaces. So I actually started off the conversation and I said, hey, do you all know what cyberbullying is? And they're like, yeah. I said, okay, great. Don't do that. So here's what we are going to talk about. And so what I actually got them to focus on was how do we lead? How do we actually use these spaces to not only make our lives better, but the lives of others better? And if you think about the cyberbullying talk that is given in so many schools, what is the best case scenario from that process is please don't be horrible people, which is kind of a low bar. But when we are focusing on leading, when we're focusing on how we could actually elevate not only our world, but the world of others, that's a much higher aspiration. One of the reasons I wanted to bring this up today is because of this conversation I just had with Kelly Croy. He's an awesome educator. He's got his own podcast, The Wired Educator, and he wrote a book called Unthink Before Bed. And it talks about how we deal with anxiety. You know, it's really good for a kid's book. But one of the things we talked about was an article he recently wrote on really kind of focusing on how do we actually, lead and actually help people if they're dealing with situations on bullying. We talked about innovation. We talked about anxiety, how we deal with these things, how we can see some of our perceived weaknesses as strengths and how we utilize this. We had a great conversation. I've known Kelly for a long time. I know you're going to really enjoy this podcast. I hope you have a wonderful day. And thanks so much for being here on another episode of the Innovator's Mindset Podcast. Hey everyone, this is George Couros. Welcome back to another episode of the Innovator's Mindset Podcast. I'm so blessed to have Kelly Croy back on the podcast. I know him and we've connected for years, and I've been on his podcast, and I was like, have you been on my podcast? Because we've just talked so much. So I just didn't even realize that. And Kelly is actually Director of Innovation is it Port Clinton? Is that
Port Clinton
in Ohio?
Yep.
He's probably like, he's so glad we're recording because I just started talking sports with him and he was like, just start recording so we talk education. So I know he's done several different things and he's got his own podcast called The Wired Educator. You can also check out his own website and blog at kellycroy.com. And we're also going to talk about his kids book, Unthink Before Bed, a children's book on mindfulness. And I'm really excited because like you have a pretty special co-author, right? On this.
That's right. My dog Jedi. Yeah.
I'm a big dog guy too. So Kelly's probably sick of me talking about dogs and sports too. So Kelly, thanks for being on the podcast. If you could just kind of introduce who you are, what you do today and how you got there, I think it's a great place to start.
Yeah. Thank you, George. Thanks for having me on the show. And I love talking with you. Your newsletter, I feel like I know you because I read it and, I respond to you quite a bit with questions and you're always so kind to reply and things. So I feel like we've had a great friendship for a long time.
Yeah.
My educational story, I was a 7th grade English teacher for 26 years, greatest job in the world. And I was recruited to a neighboring district to become their Director of Innovation and Instruction. I've been doing that for 7 years. I've been hosting the Wired Educator podcast for quite a long time. I've had 233 episodes. Excellent guests like George Couros and Jimmy Casas and you name it. They've been on the show. And I really love that time, an hour a week spending with an amazing educator. Helps me get better, helps me help other people get better, helps my district get better. And then, I got a creative side too. I like to draw and I like to write. And so I blog and I've written a couple books. And, you were gracious enough today, George, to help me out with some ideas on how I could possibly get some more speaking invitations and things. So I appreciate that.
Well, yeah. And I'm like, Kelly, we were talking about this before. Kelly reached out to me asking me for some advice on stuff he's doing. And I'm always glad to help. And Kelly's been so gracious, not only with me, but I know with tons of other people. So I was glad to do that. I got a couple of questions for you, first of all. And,
Yeah.
I'm obviously pretty excited about innovation, right? That's kind of my thing.
Right.
Um, I love that you were an English teacher recruited to do like a director of innovation job. And one of the reasons why, and I talk about this all the time, is that people will say, "Oh, innovation, technology, they're, like they're separate. They're not really." And I'm like, "No, you didn't really do that because typically the people that are the innovation people in districts are the tech people that we just changed their title, right? Like it
Right.
went from like director of technology to director of innovation. And my argument's always been is like, why isn't your curriculum person the
Yeah.
innovation person, right? Because it's really about how we look at new and better ways of learning. So how did you see like your role as an English teacher really kind of, moving towards that role of director of innovation?
Well, I'm not saying this just because I'm on your show, but I think your book, Innovator's Mindset, I think that's really the right approach. It is a mindset. No, I really mean that. So like, I love literature, I love writing, but no matter where I was, like you could put me anywhere in the world. Like if I was at a hospital, I was looking around the hospital for ideas on what I could bring back to our school or our classroom, right? I'm like, oh my gosh, this doctors walk around with an iPad, doing clinical notes and stuff. We should have that in our schools for our special education department or guidance counselors. I remember one time I went to a car dealership, and the car dealership guy had a name tag on the back of the name tag. It kind of spelled out their mission and their culture statements and stuff. I'm like, I'm bringing that back to the school. And so I think when I was tapped out by another district to become the director of innovation, they'd already seen the ideas that I was collecting. And so you kind of, before you're a leader, you lead, right? That's why you get selected to lead. And I think, I was thinking drones, in the English classroom, and my principal was like, you're crazy. That's not where drones go. But it really is your mindset. And I wanted to engage kids. I knew what they were interested in. I was interested in it as well. But, technology should be woven and embedded in everything. And a lot of innovation just isn't technology. It's systems. It's a way of thinking. It's who do we need, what positions we need to create and things. So it's a mindset. Yeah.
Well, I'll give you an example of an innovation, and you kind of alluded to it, and it's something that was advice that was given to me to think differently. When people are moving into administrator positions or they're applying for assistant principal, directors, things like this. And you mentioned that, they already saw you leading. I tell people that are applying for those positions, find the leadership standards, whatever they use, and then actually show how you're meeting those leadership standards in your role as a teacher right now. And so basically, you are saying, I'm already doing the stuff that you're asking for in my current role. And it's interesting because I don't know, like maybe that was just intuitive to you. That was advice that had to be explicitly given to me. And it was like, oh, I am like leading already. I am meeting these standards because now you become a sure thing. So that was advice given to me by my mentor, Kelly Wilkins. And it was kind of like the analogy she used was the idea of like, dress to the job you want, not necessarily the job you have. And so like create, those spaces to the job you want, not necessarily the job you have. And it's not that you don't love your job that you currently have, but you're already kind of meeting the standards that are expected, in those different positions. There's one thing that you said that I thought was interesting that kind of stuck out to me was the idea of how you doing your podcast makes you better for your district.
Oh yeah.
And I really like that because sometimes people see like, here's Kelly and he does his job. And then he's like doing the side stuff that has nothing to do with his job. But I feel like blogging, podcasting, all of the stuff that I've done, when I was working in a school district, it really helped me. Even, I know this sounds weird. I know that you speak and you work with other districts. I used to do that because I wasn't full-time because I was speaking on the side. And the way I kind of justified it, and my superintendent understood this, was when I go to these other places to speak, I'm not just like speaking and leaving. I'm like going to sessions. I'm checking out other things. And I will take stuff from other people, and they paid me to come there. Right. So it cost you nothing for me to go and then bring some of these ideas back. So like how, like, can you give like an example of like how you doing your podcast has actually benefited your own school district?
Oh, yeah, completely. Absolutely. That's the first way I actually look at it. So,
Hmm.
whatever I'm writing about or whatever I'm interviewing about, probably what is or was a challenge in our district. And so I think out of 233 episodes, only one time did I agree to interview somebody who contacted me. I go hunting for people to interview, and I base it on what our biggest challenge is. So right now, one of our biggest challenges in our district is we want our educators to be better informed about what it means to be trauma informed but with teaching and learning. So I'm scouring articles and I'm scouring books and Twitter and everything else to find someone who is that expert. And I'll reach out to them and I'll set up an interview and I'll ask them the questions that our teachers have. I'll ask them the questions that our leadership has, and we'll actually apply them. And then sometimes we invite them to come to our school or, we'll do follow-up questions and things. But countless times I can think of, the biggest problem that our school district has faced. I went out and found an expert, interviewed him on the podcast. Louisa Moats is probably one of the figureheads of the science of reading. Kendra Van Doren is our Baton Elementary principal, and she was working with her teachers on the science of reading. And so I reached out to Louisa Moats. Kendra sat with me and three of her teachers, and we interviewed her with real questions about in the classroom that were impacting her teachers and everything. So we've done that again and again, and I'll keep doing it. So the podcast is really a way for me to connect our district with experts. I feel
That's such a like, talk about innovation, right? Like, talk about that. You're getting content. You're sharing your stuff, sharing your work with the world. But then also, I love that. To be honest with you, I was not the answer I was expecting. I love that. That was an awesome answer. So hopefully someone here picks that up, because I think there is a great opportunity to connect and learn. Like I sometimes people reach out to me. I reach out to a ton of people, and I own my own publishing company, but I actually never limit my like the people I talk to by only people that have written books for my company. Right.
right.
I actually love promoting other people's books and things like this, because I don't think anyone says like, I only have, enough for one book. And so I'm going to buy someone, I think that it's, and if they do, and they decide to buy that one, that's what works best for them. And I think that to me is, that there's no, it only helps me grow. And I think that if we can help shine a light on other people, and that also will help us too. So I love that. And speaking of books, right? And I didn't publish this one, and I'm gladly promoting, because I love the focus here. You have a children's book, and it's called Unthink Before Bed, a children's book on mindfulness. And I'm, I'm thinking about how this would benefit my kids right now. So tell me about the book. What is it about, and what are you hoping to achieve with it?
Sure. So, I'm kind of the person who will share all my feelings with you. So forgive me if I go too far, but I suffer a lot from anxiety. I worry a lot. Like after this interview, I'll be like, what did George think when I said this? That's just the way my brain works. And then unfortunately, I saw it in some of my students, and unfortunately I see it in my own daughters as well. And I still struggle a bit, especially at nighttime, especially Sunday nights, right? The Sunday scaries, your week's getting ready to come at you. And I try to write things and interviews and share things that help other people. That's kind of my whole thing. How can we get better? And I thought, I have a lot of conversations with my daughters about the week, like how to get their mind right for the week. I thought, man, some of these ideas should be kind of documented and in a fun way. And I love to draw cartoons, and I love my dog Jedi. And so he's a lot of fun. So Jedi and I sat down to write a rhyming book at bedtime that teaches, if it's read regularly, teaches children and adults. If you look at the Amazon reviews, the adults say it was meant for them as well. How to prepare for your week, laying your clothes out and having everything ready so your mind's not rushed around in the morning, what to think, what not to think about, and how to change your mindset and focus as you're laying down for bed.
Mhm.
Focused a lot on breathing and different things like that. And then, of course, in the background, Jedi is doing silly little things that kids love to see. But I love the comments that I've gotten back about the art, about the writing, but mostly about how it's helped people, and it's helped adults and it's helped kids. I'm really proud of it. It's a fun book to read.
Mhm.
There's a QR code in the back that if you scan it, I'll read it to you. So it'll take you to an audio recording of me. I
Awesome.
like to tell people I've been putting kids to sleep for 34 years. So and you can listen to it as well. I put the book in dark mode. So every page is black with the art on it. So kind of like a phone when it goes into dark mode. And I'm really proud of it. It's been a lot of fun. I'm
Awesome.
working on another book illustrated with my dog about attitude. I don't know when it's going to come out. I guess when it's ready. But I think it answers some questions, and I think it helps parents too. They don't know what to say to their kids when they're anxious. Like just basically, I think people say, "Don't think that,"
Right.
and there really are steps that we can take. And so in the book, there's 10 I go through that kind of prepare people for a night of rest. And so that's how the book came to be, and I'm real happy with it. Always, ever since I was a little kid and learned how to draw, I wanted to create a children's book.
It's
And
awesome.
so I'm really, really happy with this. Yeah, I'm glad my dog's in it too.
Well, and everyone check it out. It's in the link down below. Unthink Before Bed, a children's book on mindfulness. And I've talked openly about anxiety that I have, and
Yeah.
it's the same thing. But there is a Gladwell book. In I can't remember the title, but I'll link it down below as well. And it's focused on the story of David and Goliath. Like that's kind of how it starts off. And the mentality of the story of David and Goliath is David is the underdog and he beats this favorite in Goliath. But when he actually kind of talks about it, well, David was actually very quick. He's very fast. And what was the perceived weakness is actually a strength, right? And
Yes.
actually, Goliath was like kind of doddering, couldn't move around very well. So
Right.
the mentality of like this, and so when I think about my anxiety, one of the things that's really important to me is I think sometimes when we have anxiety, it like scares us from sharing to the world, and we tend to hold stuff in. And the way I kind of look at I know, and this is a very personal thing, right? This is not. I'm not saying you should all think like me. I'm just saying this is how I don't want to say deal with it. How I utilize it, to be honest with you, is well, my anxiety it really helps me think about how like what other people might think and trying to understand their perspective. So when I write, I am very cognizant of like, hey, what could be the argument against what I'm saying, and how do I address it beforehand, so that you're really trying to think about that too. So that a lot of that process is through my own anxiety, is like trying to get in other people's heads, so I can kind of deal with this too. And the thing I've often talked about is when I write, I try to do a 360-degree view. Like, what is going to be the pushback to what I'm saying, and how do I address it? And I actually think that comes weirdly enough from my anxiety. And that Gladwell book, I probably wouldn't have said that before I read that, but it was like, and such a good book, not only for our own things that we might struggle with, but how we see our students. Because sometimes oh, this kid has ADHD and they're super hyperactive. And it's like, well, how do we actually utilize that? Like there's parts in that book where they talk about a lot of CEOs are dyslexic, and their dyslexia actually made them pay very deep attention to detail, which is why they are actually beneficial for those positions, which I thought was a really fascinating way to look at things. So I really appreciate that, because I know as someone who deals with that, and I'm very cognizant. You're always a little bit nervous. You don't want to pass these things down to your kids, but it's
Yeah.
reality. So I really appreciate this. Now, I want to ask you about a blog post that you just wrote, and you can share this in the link down below. You talk about the title is "What Everyone Needs to Know About Bullying and How to Get Onto Your Life when a bully steps into it." Tell us a little bit about. I actually want to know why you wrote this first, and then what it's about.
Sure.
Because like
Sure. So
when I write stuff like this, it's me being mad at somebody. Like somebody did
yeah,
something to me. Did that happen to you, or is this like
yeah, I'd say there's some truth to that.
yeah?
One, I was a middle school teacher, and I saw a lot of, at least a fair amount of students and families who shared. They would say, hey, my kid's being bullied. And so I wanted to talk about the difference between when somebody's being mean and a jerk and who's really being a bully. But there is some bullying going on. And I wanted to offer some help of what it was. I felt bullied sometimes when I was a kid, a lot because of my name, Kelly, which I talk about in the post. This is a resource that I refine each October and share out because that's National Bullying Prevention Month. And I just think, like, I know, like, I got a freshman in high school right now, and she is not being bullied at all. But there's some pieces in this post that really help parents on how to talk to their kids about when they're having low self-esteem. And I really believe there's the two fixes for bullying is, one is leadership, creating more leaders in your school and helping people become leaders. And two is self-confidence. You know, when you're feeling good about yourself, it's really hard to take other people's hurtful words and have pain. And so, you know, we have a lot of conversations with our daughter, a lot of what I use in that post about how to reframe and get a better mindset about certain situations and what people say. To this day, I'm still the kind of person who analyzes somebody's facial expression or words and, you know, what they mean by that. And I overthink it a little bit. And that's what this post is about. So it's really to help create a conversation with parents, with schools, with kids about, you know, the perception of being bullied, the actuality of being bullied, how to become more confident, how to think differently. And I even address a little bit about, you know, devices use, which I do in Unthink Before Bed as well.
Yeah.
You know, devices should have bedtimes, I say, you know. And so
Right.
I think that's all important. So that's why
Absolutely.
I share the post each year. Yeah. And really get a good response each year. This year I updated it a little more with some of the social media work, because I really do see a lot of kids just on their devices a lot. And there's a lot of pressure, you know, there's a lot of pressure to look like the people on Instagram and go, you know,
Yeah.
I have one daughter who says, we don't do anything, you know, we need to do something more exciting. She wants Instagram posts or something like that. And so we have to have these conversations. So I think it's helpful.
Well, there's one point you make in it. You say don't encourage a bully, and you say if you're laughing along with the bully, making fun of someone else, you're a bully too. One of the things that I've seen too, and this is a reality. I'm just gonna call it out. This is not just for kids, by the way. There's a lot of this going on in.
Oh yeah.
There's lots of this going on in education, and I actually just don't. I don't. To be honest, I don't have time for it. And
Yeah.
sometimes I'm like, dude, I'm like a 50-year-old dad. Like, like I don't like I got other stuff to worry about than this part. And when someone like people, I know when someone says something really nasty and then other people go and like it,
Yeah.
that's also encouraging, right? And it's like, you know, I've seen some stuff written about people, friends of mine, and then watching other people go like it. I'm like, you're just, and I just don't have time for people like that because it's like
That really hurts.
and
Yeah.
a lot of times they'll say this and they're like, but then you'll see bullying behaviors, right? Because a lot of times people think, well, I'm right, so I'm just kind of standing up. No, you're actually being a bully. Even, you know, there's better ways you can communicate with people, but you know, attacking someone,
Yeah.
this isn't about being mean. And I think that's so I really appreciated that you shared this. And one of the things I really, really agree with you, and I think is that I'm not really big on the notion of anti-bullying because I think when you say it's kind of Michelle Baldwin is a good friend of mine. She told me this once, and I know she got it from somewhere, and I don't know where. She said it's really hard to get people to not think about something. So when you're thinking about anti-bullying, you often put bullying in in the head of people.
Yeah.
And she gave me an example. Said if I told you don't think of an elephant, what do you think of?
An
Right.
elephant. Right.
Right. And so really the what you said, and I totally agree with, and I've been sharing about this forever, is really we shouldn't be focused on anti-bullying. We should be focused on leadership. Because
Yeah.
really, how do we get, you know, people to, you know, move forward to look at those things? And I think it's, you know, if you talk about anti-bullying, the best result of that behavior is please don't be horrible. Like that's
Right.
as long as you're not horrible, we're good. Right.
Be a good
But,
human. Yeah.
right. As
You
opposed
know,
to leadership
George,
going further. Yeah.
yeah, those are the first words out of my mouth. Sometimes I get invited to speak on this very presentation, and my first words are, "This is not a bullying presentation," and
Yeah.
that's exactly what I say. This is a leadership presentation,
Mhm.
and it's about leading yourself personally, and it's about becoming a leader in your organization or your community and things. So
I love that.
being better humans. Yeah.
I love that. Okay. So t- I know you've been doing the Wired Educator for a while. How has that process, that podcast, how has that like evolved over time? Because I actually would say you were one of the first educators that I remember having a podcast. Like you started this
Oh,
long
wow.
ago. And I actually started mine in 2020. And we were talking about this before the podcast, but I didn't
Yeah.
start it because of COVID. Because I think a lot of
Right.
people just started. I actually started it before. Now it evolved since COVID. I
Yeah.
remember actually, like it was so hard for me to record, and not the technical aspect, but just talking. And I was like, oh my God. And I was just really, and now I feel comfortable doing it. And, I'll do solo podcasts, things like that too. But how is that, like, how has the podcast evolved for you over the years? Like what has changed from like when you first started doing it to what it is today?
Sure. The Wired Educator podcast started completely by accident. I ran into an educator named Chris Tolley out of Philadelphia who was talking about a subject that I still don't have a lot of interest in. It's career tech, but
Right.
I loved the way he was talking about it. And I loved his enthusiasm and passion for education. He could have been talking about, foam rubber or something, but the way he was talking about it was so exciting. I knew that educators in my district needed to hear his passion for education. So I interviewed him. And then something tragic happened to Chris. And I actually interviewed him on YouTube. It was a video.
Mm.
And Chris had some mental wellness challenges and stuff. And we lost Chris in the community. And I had people reach out to me, remembering that I did that interview with him. And so I thought to myself, there's so many amazing educators with amazing stories that I want to archive them and share them out and celebrate and promote them to the world. And so I'm kind of a collector, a hunter, if you will. I look for stories of educators that I believe need to be shared, archived, and promoted. Sometimes they're really famous. I got to interview Jim Tressel. He was, national champion football coach for the Ohio State Buckeyes. But a lot of people don't know he was a middle school teacher, and that's what we talk about. We talk about him being a middle school teacher. Yeah. Another one's Seth Godin. One of the great, New York Times bestselling author. But we talk about, his not attack, but his challenge to current education and things. Mm-hmm. And then, they don't have to be famous either. There was a young lady who posted on Twitter that she was going to have her first observation on Zoom during the pandemic.
Right.
And so I reached out to her and I said, man, I got to talk to you about this, because she was really nervous about it. And so it can be just, your everyday educator in the classroom who's doing great things, or someone who's written a book, or anywhere in between. I look for stories. I look for people doing interesting things in education that I think others need to hear. And so I'm a pretty good conversationalist. I try to dig in and get them to share their story. And it's really fascinating. I learn and grow. I feel my district learns and grows. Mm-hmm. I got a great one coming up. Her name is Jordan Zimmerman. She just met the president. She's autistic. She is, until 18 years of age, she really didn't have a form of communication. And now she's an Apple Distinguished Educator. She traveled to Ireland to speak. She's writing the curriculum for autistic students all around the world. And she's an amazing speaker. She uses an iPad as her communication tool. I can't wait to share that one out. It's going to be a really unique interview, but these are powerful stories. And, how does a educator in Port Clinton, Ohio, in a small school like that get connected to some of these big stories? I hope my podcast can serve as that tool. So,
yeah, and that, like, when I started this podcast, it was meant to be just me talking for like 10 minutes or whatever. And how it evolved during COVID was I was like, oh God, this is gonna be too much me. Like, I gotta get other people.
Yeah.
And then I started, interviewing people. And I feel that through the process, and, as we were prepping, I always say to people, you don't have to prep anything. I'm going to ask you, some questions based on what you tell me about what you do. And, like, you see me sometimes writing notes and stuff like that. I feel it's really improved my listening skills, my conversation skills, and actually going through that process. So this is not just about, and I think part of it too is it doesn't make me I'm not really worried about views, listens, and all that other stuff. I use this space as a way for me to grow and get better from talking to people like yourself and to grow. And if someone can learn and benefit from that as well, even better. So that's something. And so I really enjoyed talking to you today. Kelly, it's been awesome. And so here's what I'm going to challenge people to do. Think about like what you can start because of this, right? Because Kelly and I were talking about his blog, stuff he's created over the years. But I'd love to hear from you in the comments, maybe post on Instagram something. Let's hear from you, some of your takeaways from this, because I think that's where some of the best learning happens. I encourage you to check out Kelly's website, check out his podcast, and check out his book, Unthink Before Bed, a children's book on mindfulness. All of that will be linked in the description wherever you're listening or watching this. But Kelly, thanks for being on the podcast. It was wonderful to have you on and just sit and chat and catch up.
All right. It's an honor. I loved it. Thanks, George.
Thanks, brother. All right. Have a good day, everyone. Take care.